Here we are. Good morning, and good morning to everybody watching us on LinkedIn, YouTube, and also Facebook, listening to us in Clubhouse as well. It's a pleasure to have you with us this morning on October the 30th, and we have a very nice guest today who has been here before, but it's been a bit of a time. Yes, there is a lag here. Yes, since we first had Carlos with us. And today, thank you so very much, Carlos, for joining us. It is such a pleasure to have you with us again. I am happy to actually say that we continue to a certain extent the conversation of the first podcast, but today we're going to talk about something that we have never talked about before. So it is the life of Basho. So Matsuo Basho, this is the haiku author who lived here in the 17th century and who has become very prominent with his works, the haiku poems that many people know, and yet the number of those people is not large enough for everybody in the world, to appreciate actually and to know and appreciate the work of Matsuo Basho. Before I actually give you the screen, I would like to once again say a big thank you to our first sponsor, Kanchu.com, and James Howell. To everybody who has watched us before, you know that Kanchu is a company that works in the field of real estate. They're based in Yokohama, but they do buy and sell real estate in Tokyo and Yokohama both. They offer services in English and Japanese and also do property management and investment property. To connect with them, to work with them, reach out to James Howell at james@kanachu.com so that you can tell them about your project and have your needs really met. So, thank you very much. Tim and I have been friends with James for a while, and we're
Great
very
guy.
happy to, yes, we're very happy to have them, James and Kanachu, as our sponsor. So,
For sure.
Carlos, thank you very much
Wait,
for your
hey
patience.
Maya, can I just
Yes?
can I just jump in real quick? I wanted to build off what you said at the
Oh, please
beginning.
do. Yes,
Just
definitely.
a couple of comments,
Yes.
as an old Japan hand, I've been here since, I came first in 1977.
Yes.
I was thrown into Japan. I wasn't interested in Japan. I just was forced to come here, but I embraced the experience and I started learning. So I like to tell people I was falling in love with Japan before it was cool.
Hmm.
Before the
Before
rest
it
of the
was cool. Yes.
before the rest of the world discovered
Right.
it. And
Hmm.
again, it wasn't by my own, choice. It was just I was kind of forced into that. And I'm so heartened to see the growing interest in Japanese culture over the years, and I'm seeing it in the younger generations. People want to
Mm.
study these. Of course, we can thank anime, but you see someone like Basho, the more traditional Japan,
Yes.
also now is getting prominence. I feel like anime is the gateway into the culture for many people, which is fine. I think it's great.
Hmm.
And I studied Basho, not in depth. So I don't have your knowledge, Carlos, but I studied it in the early '80s. Just because I was going to, ICU, which there's a big focus on culture in that university. Um, so I love to, I'm really looking forward to hearing your talk about it today. And just as an aside, my Japanese mother-in-law is both a
Mm-hmm.
haiku poet, published author, and she
Wow.
has, I
Mm.
mean, she's 93 now, so she hasn't been writing haiku lately, but she has a license to teach it. And so over the years, I got some of her insights, and if and when it's relevant today, I'll maybe interject some of her, just a few of her insights as well. So
Please.
take the floor, Carlos. It's all yours.
Well, thank you, everyone. I don't know if you have heard of me before. My name is Carlos. I'm a Japanese teacher at my own company. I'm originally Spanish. And well, in regards for the topic of today, I used to teach at the University of Salamanca, back in Spain, and well, it was very interesting. I thought at the university, I also taught both literature and Japanese literature translation from Japanese into Spanish. And during the first year that I was teaching for, it was interesting because, well, the university didn't really give me a curriculum to teach, so I just had to organize it all myself. And even though I'm a translation major, I didn't really have that much background into literature specifically. Even though I like reading, but I mean, I like reading what I like reading. I don't like reading, everything in general. And I thought it would be interesting to translate, haikus, because I mean, they're just super. They're short, they're interesting, they're doable, and a lot of people know about them. And at the end of the school year, we thought, we had a lot of haiku that were translated. And I asked my students, you guys, maybe we can have have a publishing house publish our, the haikus that we translated into Spanish. Or, if no one wants to do that, we can do it ourselves, maybe on Amazon, self-publish or something like that. And
Right.
one company, goodness, one publishing house was interested, but they were like, we only want you to do Matsuo Basho. So we ended up, we wrote his biography. I wrote the biography, and I had the students translate the haiku that I actually, well, then checked and corrected. And it was a huge journey, but well, now we have the complete book.
Oh,
So very, very nice.
beautiful. Yes. Yes.
Congratulations. It looks nice.
Thank
Congratulations
Nice
you.
on that.
cover. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And also for everybody who is watching us and doesn't know much about haiku. So haiku are short poems that usually consist of 17 syllables. And they are supposed to be very simple, but also convey a lot of depth. And one of the specifics of haiku is that they're usually written about the moment. So, what the author is feeling, well, the author is trying to convey the
And
feeling of
nature.
the moment and nature. Yes,
It's nature
it's
has
the
to be part of it because I've been scolded
part
by
of
my
it.
mother-in-law for writing a haiku that
Yes.
had nothing to do with nature. But go ahead.
Right. Now, what I wanted to say personally for me, knowing that each poem has to be 17 syllables, um, I just cannot put my head around this, how
Yeah.
difficult it is to express your feeling and, the environment in which you are at that point of time in just 17 short syllables. So,
Yeah.
but this is what I wanted to say, and just for the people who are not really familiar with the genre. Carlos,
Yeah.
please go ahead. Yes.
Well, it's so funny that you mentioned specifically that. That's a very, very interesting and a very well-known fact about haiku, that it's about the
Mhm.
moment and about nature. But who actually
Nature,
set up those
yes.
principles about haiku was actually Matsuo Basho. And if we take a short look about history, we had three main schools of high school of haiku. Sorry,
Haiku,
the
yeah.
main the first school of haiku, which also Matsuo Basho was first part of, and then he evolved into the next one. The first one was the Teimon school, and the Teimon school was more, instead of really talking about nature, they were more like, let's put a lot of emphasis on the ancient Chinese. Let's do a lot of
Mm,
references on Chinese old literature, which made the haiku really hard to comprehend to people who didn't really know much about cultural references or Chinese history.
mhm.
That delved eventually into the Danding school, which was a little bit crazy in a way. And Matsuo Basho also was part of this school in his late 20s. The Danbin school was more for, let's make a lot of puns. Let's not really follow any rules specifically.
Mhm.
And it was criticized eventually because it just didn't really follow a lot of rules, and it was
Right.
focused a lot on the unexpected nature of ideas as they come. You know what comes, you write. And it was actually
They were,
Basho who
yeah. Sorry,
who
they were
went
the reformists. Yes.
So I got a
Reformists,
quick question.
revolutionaries.
A quick question.
Yes.
So could you say the name of the school again? The Temu school? The what was it?
The first one is the Taemon school.
Demon.
Taemon school, yes.
Mhm.
Okay.
And the second one is the Danding school. Taemon,
Danmin.
well, Danding, Danrin.
Okay. So my question, you mentioned the word puns, and that kind of
Yeah.
triggered me a little bit to think because Sendu is about humor and puns, and it's got the same format as haiku in terms of 575. And that's
Mm-hmm.
how I was introduced to it, actually. I went through that, indirectly to
Uh-huh.
get to haiku, right? So did that evolve into Sendu, or was Sendu in existence before that? Because I don't recall my history on that.
I'm not 100% sure if I'm
Okay.
if
Okay.
what the connection over there is exactly,
Okay.
but I
Interesting.
mean,
Okay.
they
That's
were
so,
both in the well, Dandin school evolved in the 1670s, I think,
Mm-hmm.
mhm.
and I think the main person that was the leader of the Dandin school was a poet called Nishiyama Soin, and it
Okay.
was based more on waka style first and
Okay.
rejecting reason.
Right.
But I don't know if that
Japanese waka. Okay. Yeah.
helps. Yes, based on yeah, in the beginning waka.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
It was,
Okay.
and it was very interesting specifically because during these two schools, both the Daemon first and the Dandin school,
Mm-hmm.
the haiku wasn't really placed, didn't really have an important place in Japanese literature. Haiku was
Mm-hmm.
just something people would just do, and it's not something like denga, or it's not something like waka, which is actually actual poetry, right? Considered at the time.
Yeah.
And it was actually Matsuo Basho that put haiku. Well, at the time it was called haikai, but it's pretty much the same
Gotcha.
at the
Yeah.
spot
Yeah.
that we know now. And now we talk
Right.
about haiku. We don't really talk about waka poetry, or we don't really talk about benga
That's true.
poetry.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Good.
The
Good. Good.
interesting thing to me, and I am not a specialist at all in Japanese literature and the life of Matsuo Basho, but the few facts that I know is that he actually was inspired by his travels. And so his first travel, and then the next one, and the next one, and on the way, so he evolved, and he, as you said, he turned into that revisionist, if I can say that, and then his disciples, he taught them that they don't have to actually stick too strictly or adhere to the rules that existed, so that they could get more freedom of expression? Or is it something that I have misunderstood about his journey and his evolution as a haiku writer?
I mean, it's we say so many things, and derive
Yeah.
so many ideas from Basho. But it's true that he thought of life as a constant journey, and that's why he was taking all these trips this whole life. And um, for him, he was always saying that he wanted to live the life of the moving cloud. So he never wanted to stay in one place, and he focused on the scholars before him.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically, Saigyo was the biggest influence in his life, who was a samurai, then, well, first monk and then turned poet, who worked for an emperor called Toba. And he was like, yes, I'm going to leave the emperor to just pursue my desire to travel. And
Mm-hmm.
it's very interesting because the biggest trip of the Matsuo Basho undertook, which gave birth to Oku no Hosomichi, the narrow road to the interior, the book that he published in, well, the trip that he carried out in 1689, and then eventually that became his main book, was inspired in Saigyo's travels, and they
Oh,
went to some of the similar places, but with the difference that Saigyo went in the year 1000 something, and Basho did it in 1689, which was 1600. I mean, yeah, 600 years later, and
mm-hmm.
yeah, that changed the way he understood poetry. And we think that that's when he acquired, well, the satori, the nirvana, the Buddhist nirvana, because he was also a very big Buddhist.
Mm. So what? Oh, sorry, Tim. Did you want to?
No, no, go ahead.
No,
I'll wait. I'll wait.
no, because yes, because Carlos mentioned Satori and well, that's the Buddhist nirvana and so on. So it tells me also that there were strong influences on his works, like ideological and religious influences from Buddhism, maybe also, I don't know, Taoism or Confucianism. Was there anything like that? If you can give us more insights into this.
Absolutely. Basho was a big Buddhist. Actually, that was his main. He did have disciples that were more focused on Taoism and especially Confucianism.
Yes.
But his biggest influence was Buddhism, and he had an actual priest that taught him to meditate. His name was Butcho.
Okay.
Okay.
Butcho. Yes. Oh, you froze a
And
little bit.
Tokyo at a time
Yeah.
called Edo. I'm sorry, I think I lost you for a second.
Yeah. But yes, we can
There
hear
you go.
you.
I think it's
Yes.
okay. It's fine.
Okay.
And is that okay? Sorry.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
we're good.
Yes.
So yes,
Okay.
all these Buddhist concepts, of life, being in a constant flow and understanding everything as part of something bigger than yourself was a huge part and a huge principle that actually Matsuo Basho lived about, and he actually wrote a lot in his travel journals that contained the poetry he later published.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I jump in just for
Yes.
a second? Okay. So you mentioned, the kind of the roots of China, which I think are interesting because I took a class in college and it was Japanese art, and it looked at
Mm-hmm.
Japanese art pre-Buddhist introduction,
Mm-hmm.
after Buddhist introduction, and then the next stage is what I call the Japanization of Buddhist concepts. And I kind of
Mm-hmm.
see Basho as part of that movement because you know we would look at all the temples that were built like right after the introduction, the 7th, 8th, 9th centuries, right? You go to Nara where they were originally built. It looks Chinese. Everything's symmetrical. A lot of just Chinese colors, the bright reds, and then you start seeing this evolution. The symmetry goes away. The colors get more earthy and subdued, and you start seeing this Japanization
Mm-hmm.
of this Chinese tradition, including Confucianism as well, right? And writing. If you look at all of it, right? And I see Basho as part of that. And when you say, Buddhism influenced him, the fact that he was traveling, all life is a journey, that's process oriented thinking that's baked
Mm.
into, especially Zen Buddhism. Everything's a process,
Everything.
and
Yes.
and
Mm.
even and many people don't realize it came from China. The Tao, there was Taoism had an influence on Buddhism's evolution in China, and Zen was close to that.
Mm.
And Tao also means Michi or Do, is how
Yes.
the
The
Chinese
dough.
would pronounce it, right? Which is the way.
The
It's
way.
it's a process, right? So that's kind of an interesting, to me, interesting, huh? And then the last point is during the Muromachi period, there's an essay I read years ago by Barbara Rush, and her theory was that during the Muromachi period, they started spreading Buddhism throughout Japan, but many people were illiterate. The elites could read
Right.
and write Chinese, right?
Mm.
And so they would tell stories. This is the roots of storytelling, like Rakugo. Rakugo started before the Edo period, right? And they Japanized, and she calls it the cinemization, because it was
Mm.
visual as well as talking. And they went throughout Japan and they told these stories, and they created what she called a national literature, which embodied the values of the country. And again, driven by Buddhist priests mostly, who eventually evolved into other areas. So again, Basho seems like he was kind of part of that trend, although admittedly they were approaching the Edo period, right? At that point in time, right? The late 1600s. So again, a
Yes,
couple
that's
observations, but
right.
I'll give the floor back to you.
Yeah, but that is, I mean, we always have to look at history and, the Buddhist way. Everything is a process. You start from one thing and it gets evolved little by little into something different. And the fact that, people not being literate enough or not being able to read or to write also played a huge role in Basho. He wanted to make poetry accessible to everyone. Forget about, the the complicated puns, or forget about ideas you would only understand, like the Dandin school, or forget about the complex and obscure Chinese references that the Daemon school had. So he was just like, this is what nature is. This is the universe, and we are all part of it, and we have all the right and the duty to understand it as well. And that is what haiku is. That's what we do in this 575 syllable poem. So yeah, it's wonderful, and it's just so interesting, so short, and yet so
Yeah.
complex at the same time.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's always to me because we tend to think, in the Western world, we tend to think that the world around us or every situation is just what it is at the moment. And I think that we are less inclined to see the constant flow of things. Only recently, I believe that people have started talking, and when I say only recently, maybe it's the past decade or 2 decades, that people started talking really and vocalize this concept of being more flexible and being more accepting of the changes that happen to us, and more probably recognizing them as such, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because with and it also, of course, it is uh, based in how our history and let's say the yeah, I mean, like cultural history happened in the Western world, in Europe and so on. But it's fascinating to see how the Japanese still, once again, of course, based on the Chinese tradition, which they Japanized later, how they have actually been all the time very aware of the constant change of the environment, and how they adapt all the time. And if I can say something, that adaptation actually is the root of their resilience. And probably it's the same not only with the Japanese. It's, the resilience is very, very typical for this part of Asia, the northeast part of Asia, probably other rice cultures as well, because Tim, you usually mention rice cultures,
Yeah.
right, in this part of the world. So adaptation, resilience, acceptance of
Yeah.
what you cannot control, and then working around it, right? So,
Yeah. Just kind of a weird observation, and I might be off base. We're focusing on how, everything's a process. Things are always dynamic and changing and moving, right? So the only
yes.
constant is change, right? That's to summarize it. I almost feel like the Western philosophical outlook was to look for constants, universal
Yeah.
rules that no matter
Universal
what
rules, yeah.
happens, they never
Yes.
change. And to
Mm,
them, that was reality. It seems like that was like the orientation.
hmm.
It's not that people didn't recognize change, because there were philosophers, I forget who said it, but you never step in the same river twice. So it's not like
Yeah.
absent, but I think the Western focus seemed to be in that direction. Is that off
Mm.
base? That
No, that's 100% how Basho spoke actually in his travel journals. He was constantly speaking about the nature of the universe, and
Hmm.
how doing, for instance, doing good to others is doing good to you, because we are all the same. One of the principles he talked about was the butsu ga ichi. Butsu is mono, thing. Ga
Hmm.
yeah,
is ware, me. And ichi is like coincident, matching, right? So like the
Hmm.
others and I are the same thing. He mentioned constantly this specific principle, the fact that the only constant thing that we have is change. And then I think there was also a principle for this one as well, but I forgot. I would
right,
have to
right.
look it up.
Yeah,
But yes, that's why he was really obsessed with how he was living his life. One of the things that impressed me the most was the fact that throughout his life, he experienced many, many, many life events. He experienced love. He experienced, becoming very, very famous at a time which it was not, obviously like now. He experienced being rich in a way, because a lot of his students were very, very rich, and they paid for his houses. But he
Oh,
was he never lived in very very luxurious conditions. one of
Right.
the last things that he said before he passed, he sent a letter to when he went to Osaka. Right before he died, he was not feeling great already. He was 60, barely 50, and
Mm-hmm.
he sent a letter to one of the disciples saying, "Can you please lend me 50 bu? I think it was, the money at the time. I will have to pay later to you. Maybe more than later. Maybe I will not return it back." And he was still. It's so interesting to see how someone who acquired, at the time, national fame, never really, he kept on going in a tabula rasa state, always a blank state, continuing trying to learn and not, accepting change as how it is.
Right. Yes. How it is, the way it is, and yes, how we basically deal with it. Yes, and thank you for this. Yes. Oh, it's time, almost time for our second sponsor.
Oh.
Right.
Let
Yeah,
me
let's do it now.
let's do it now. And yes, before we dive into the next part of this podcast. So the next, well, our second sponsor is Houze Inc. And once again, Houze Inc. Works in the field of real estate. They do projects, well, and offer them in, well, by bilingual, basically projects in the fields of home design and reconstruction, also commercial building property. So there, the main person you want to work with is Hana Oroshizawa Howell. She speaks English, perfect English. She speaks Japanese. She was born here, and she is very well versed in actually the needs of both Japanese and non-Japanese clients. So if you feel like, or if you have a project in your head in one of these areas, please reach out to her, to Hana Uroshisawa Hawa on LinkedIn, and her contact details are in the they are in the description of the video on YouTube. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much to this. We're very grateful to Hana and Housing. And Carlos, I also would like to ask you, are you ready to show us some visuals and some of the haikus and talk a little bit more about, the specifics there and your book again, of course?
Absolutely. Yes, of course. So I'm going to tell you just very quickly. Before, when I was writing the book, I was obviously at the time still teaching Japanese, and most of my students are foreigners living right now in Japan or in Tokyo. And that's why I'm in Tokyo right now as well, to see my students and,
Nice.
networking a little bit. So feel free to reach out if you want to meet me. I'll be here until Christmas. So last year, I thought I could, because I was writing the book, and I thought, if I really want to understand the life of this person that, has really nothing to do with, me, a white male who was a lot younger and, was born 400 years later. So how can I really understand what he was thinking, what was going on? And I thought I could reenact his trip, his main trip that he did in 1689. So back in last year, in 2023, I took off from Tokyo, exactly from the same spot that he left from, and
Oh,
I did his 5-month trip in a 1-month trip
Wow,
because I didn't
that's
couldn't stay that long.
impressive.
it is
Wow.
impressive, yes.
Of course,
So
he
it
didn't
was
have the
a
Shinkansen either.
they didn't have the Shinkansen. I did not take the Shinkansen either. I also tried to walk as much as I could.
Oh,
It
good
was
for you. Go on.
It was a
Yeah.
2,200-kilometer trip
Oh,
throughout
wow.
from Tokyo to the
Wow.
very north until
Wow.
the north, and then back until Nagoya. Actually, Ogaki, which is a part of Nagoya now. And
Mm-hmm.
yes, I walked, I think, 250 kilometers in total. I tried to follow exactly the
Ah,
same path that he did, stopping at the same
good for
places
you.
and trying to use, the train as little as possible, but obviously I had to take it sometimes.
Yeah.
Right.
And it was just so interesting. And one of the things that I did, which impacted me the most, was one of the first stops. I think when I was 30% in the middle of the trip,
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I did was here. I'm just gonna go ahead and share the screen with you so you guys see. Here, 画面を共有。はい。There you go. And I think if I am here, so you guys can see my screen now, right?
Yes, we can
Okay.
see it now.
Perfect.
So here we have Taigyo, who was the original poet that Matsuo Basho, followed and got inspiration from.
Mhm.
So in, the 10th century, in the 1100s, Taigyo carried out also this trip around Japan, which eventually inspired Matsuo Basho. And one of the things that he did was he wrote poet. Here, let me just lower the volume so I don't go crazy. Hear me at the same time.
Okay.
And Taigyo wrote a poem about this specific tree that we can see here. Let me just, there you go. That's the tree that he was, that he wrote a poem about now around 1,000 years ago. And that now has a little tiny temple at the very end here with the
Mhm.
ginkgo trees. And we can still see the rice fields that actually they were present at Basho's time. And this was very, very, very interesting to see because when Saigyo did the trip, his trip 1,000 years ago, he wrote this poem here, which is something like the clear water here, like we have here. The clear water flows by the side of the way. There is a little yanagi tree, a willow tree. I think that's the translation
A
in
willow
English.
tree, yes.
Yeah.
A willow tree here. So I will go ahead and take a rest, stand next to the tree. This is what he wrote in the 1100s, more or less. And then Matsuo Basho did the same thing in haiku format. And this is what he wrote. This is, there is one rice field growing and the willow tree standing here and being left. And it's so interesting to see how, probably it's not the same tree because trees don't grow for this long.
Right.
But the
Right.
fact describing the because Basho was describing the actual kishiki, the view that you had from specifically that tree, and he was describing the rice fields that had been plowed and everything, and it was just really magical for me to see how a person 1,000 years ago came here, got so inspired that he wrote a poem about that. 600 years later, the main poet in high school history went also here, inspired by that poet, and wrote another poem. And then, there's me trying to follow the paths of this obviously incredible poet, and there I was, and it felt really, really magical. I don't know. It's a feeling that I really have outside of Japan. This trying to understand and trying to feel how both Basho and Sagyo were feeling 1,000 and 600 and 400 years ago, respectively. So, well, that was very interesting.
Yes. I have a question to you. Did
Oh,
you write
please,
your
please.
own poem? Did you write your own poem on that spot?
I did not. I did not. I
Oh,
was very. I thought I wouldn't be able to do justice to any of these wonderful
sorry.
poets, so I thought,
Yes. All right. Yes.
So Carlos, quick question: when you
yes,
translate, do you follow the 575 format in the translated target language?
absolutely, absolutely.
Okay,
I
good.
have
Oh,
I figured so.
when we were translating. So this is the thing about English. Let me just stop sharing the screen for a second so I can see me for here. There you go. Stop sharing. So when we did the translation of the haiku, it was very important to keep the structure because, well, the main thing really about the haiku, regardless of the school that it was written in, was the actual structure, right? It has to follow 575 syllable structure.
yes.
And in English, you can't. I mean, you can do that as well, but English is the words in English are a lot shorter, so you need to say more things to actually keep the structure. But this is different in Spanish because Spanish is also follows really. We have also the same syllabic structure as Japanese has.
Yes,
So we have a lot
exactly.
longer words. We speak faster, the same way the Japanese people speak faster. We speak faster because our words are
Right.
faster. The words are longer. unlike English.
So
So
it's not a cliche. You really speak faster.
we do,
It's not
and
because
there
I
are
don't
studies.
understand you. Okay, I never
So we
knew that.
did keep it, and I think I
Mhm.
have. I think some. I don't know if I can find it specifically here, the poem translated, but even so, I think. Oh, there you go. It's here. A little bit before. Uh, no, a little bit later. I do have the poem here, but I don't know if it makes a lot of sense to read it out loud because do you guys speak Spanish? Any of you
I
too?
don't. I do not.
Um, I studied Spanish in school, in university, and yes, I can understand it. I don't speak it because it's just passive knowledge for me, but I can understand quite a bit of it. Yeah.
So, okay, I think here you go. If so I know the poem has to be around here in the Okuno Hosomichi part. The book is a little bit big because
Mm-hmm.
the also the letter is a little bit big,
Right.
but I think it should have. I think it should be around here. Uh, no, no.
I like the sound of the turning pages. It's such a rare sound nowadays, you know. It's
Yeah,
beautiful.
yeah, yeah.
It's
And
very
there's a
calming.
smell. There's
A
a
smell
smell
as
to
well,
literature.
yes.
So
Yes.
Maya, I just gotta say, I gotta compliment you. Like you took Spanish in college and still
Yeah.
remember at least you can listen. I
Yeah.
took it in college, so this is proof that you have a bigger brain than me because
I
I
don't think
had to,
so, Kim,
I
no.
had to delete all that memory space in my brain for Japanese to fit in. So I don't remember any.
No,
Go ahead,
no.
though.
It's yes, Carlos.
So I found the actual part where Matsuo Basho arrives, and
Yes.
Matsuo Basho says, Basho, casi al instante, el poeta se ve transportado a la época de Saigyo. Puede ver el
Oh,
mismo sauce que había descrito él hace más de 5 siglos, el solemne y formidable entre los surcos de los arrozales. And now the Saigyo translation is, it says, al margen del camino, discurre el agua pura. A la
oh.
sombra de este sauce me detendré. That's
Mhm.
the Taigyo poem, and then the Matsuo Basho poem is Los arrozales sembrados y el
Mhm.
sauce abandonado, keeping the
Right.
5-7-5 syllable structure. I don't know,
Yes,
maybe
it's
it's a little bit
there.
complicated.
It sounds beautiful, and I don't even understand it. So
Yeah. Well, I love the sound of Spanish, the Spanish language.
yeah.
That's the reason actually why I studied it. So, I mean, very romantic, but yeah, just wow, that's really beautiful, and it's fascinating because I mean, like we tend to think that when we translate from Japanese, most of the time we think about translating Japanese into English and, the complexities there and so on. But it's so much more complex when you think that it doesn't have to be translated into English only, right? So, because for every
Oh, absolutely
language,
not.
there are specifics there. And I would say that, well, my native language is Bulgarian, and Bulgarian actually is very close in terms of syllable structure, and syntax as well to Spanish. It's
Oh,
much closer to Spanish and also French than to English. So yeah, I have never translated haiku to Bulgarian though, but yes, I know that because I have studied, the language, and it's very close to Spanish in this sense of the word. Yeah. So, but it's a beautiful thing. Yeah.
it is. It was wonderful. I mean, it was a lot of work because all the sources that we had to look up. I mean, were in Japanese. I'm wearing old Japanese, and I did not really speak a lot of old Japanese, so I had to always look out for the modern translation, then
Mhm.
study a lot in the very beginning.
Yeah.
But it turned out to be wonderful. And Basho was a complex character, but he was also a pretty funny person. He made jokes. He had a lot of sex with many of his disciples. He didn't really care, men, women,
Right.
everyone. He was also very religious, very well traveled, and he had very interesting ideas. And it's so interesting. And when we think especially specifically about poetry, we don't really have a lot of references, right? Like when we study poetry,
Mm,
we're like, okay, the scholars say, well, this probably is a metaphor trying to do, trying to say this, or the author wanted to
Right, right,
represent this
right.
specifically.
yeah.
But in Basho, the good thing about Basho is that he wrote all his poems with context. They were within his travel journal, so we always know what he meant by the poem. So that
All
makes
right.
the
Mm.
translator's job a lot easier because we know exactly what he meant at that time. Or like, is this a metaphor or does he mean something else? But we kind of know, at least with a lot more, confidence, what he meant,
Mhm.
specifically each poem.
Well,
Yeah.
and that's great indeed because, as you say, when you read poetry, and I love poetry. I grew up with a lot of poetry in Bulgaria, back home in school, and even in Bulgaria, when we don't know the context, it's very difficult. So all the metaphors are left to the reader to understand and to interpret, right? Just what you said, and. Yeah, I didn't know actually that with Basho it was different, and maybe
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
No, I want to say that this is something that we really need to appreciate about, how he wrote his poems and
Yes.
how he left the context, so that, the people coming after him, the generations after him, would actually understand his feelings, what he meant, his ideas, and so on and so on. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a little bit counterintuitive because I think Japan is associated with ambiguity, and we all
Mm-hmm.
know Japanese are more comfortable with ambiguity. Like
Yeah.
if a movie ends and it's ambiguous, I hate it. My wife loves it. She loves the fact that there was an ambiguous ending, right?
Right.
And I, I only took one literature class in college, and it was uh, by a British professor, and he was Alexander Pope's The Rape of the Lock. He was analyzing this very long poem, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember sitting in the class because my brain doesn't work this way, okay, listening to him. And he's interpreting every line, layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of what it meant, and I'm thinking, how the hell does he know that? He's projecting his own meaning, which is
Yes,
fine, which is
that does
fine.
happen a lot.
I
Yes.
think I think the intention is for you to a degree to project your own meaning onto it,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
don't say it to me like it's God's truth. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
always, and I was going to say, and then my whole narrative was turned upside down by your last comment, but I always thought that, something like haiku would resonate with the Japanese because they are happy with a little bit of ambiguity in reading into the
Mm.
meaning. Or not, I don't know if more tolerant of
yeah.
ambiguity
Mm-hmm.
than I am, right?
Right.
And so maybe that's why I'm not a big poetry buff. Maybe that's why, but
Oh,
anyway,
maybe. Yeah.
yeah,
But
just a couple.
Tim, while listening to you, and I think about the poetic traditions back in Europe, okay, we have
Right.
pastoral poetry, we have the symbolism, we have postmodernism, and this and that. And I think when you think about haiku, right? And when you, for some reason, try to think about also the poetic traditions back in Europe, I wonder, and also my question or is also to you, Carlos, because you are a European, and so what do you think is, I don't know, because haiku sounds like, in a sense, I mean, haiku is very short, right? It's just 17 syllables there. So it's not really pastoral, even though nature is, part of it. But is it closer to symbolism then? And then maybe it isn't. Or is it? So it's really interesting to
Or
think about
isn't,
it.
or is it? Yeah, yeah.
Yes, because it's always, once again, another thing is that before I stop, probably poetry is so like an evergreen genre, because for everybody, regardless of the time they live in, they can interpret it based on their own experiences and their own perspectives of the world.
Yeah.
So, right,
And
and of course,
the idea of evoking a feeling,
evoking a
Right.
feeling, yes, because poetry is
right?
all about that, evoking a
Right.
feeling there. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
So,
one of the this is very interesting to that you mentioned specifically that because well, some of the principles that the Shofu style, which is the Matsuo Basho haiku poetry style, follows. One of them is the Shiori, another one is the Hosomi, and
mm-hmm,
the Shiori principle indicates that you are representing an emotion without explicitly mentioning the emotion, right?
mm-hmm,
So if you I don't know if we think of it like I think I had a poem here. The Shizukasaya iwa ni shimiru semi no koe, right? Like the
oh,
silence,
yes, this,
the
yeah,
voice of the cicadas penetrates into the stone. And there
mm-hmm,
you are, right? And then you feel all this solitude, but it's not really explicitly said in the poem. And that, well, that's the Shiori principle. And another principle that it's also related to this is the hosomi, which says that a poem will contain hosomi if the author, when they wrote it, was in a state of yugen, the state of um, a magical state where ideas flow and it's between being awake and being asleep. It's this state of maximum inspiration,
mm-hmm,
and we can, if the poem contains hosomi, then we can see it through that, and we can see, oh, we can see the author actually um, being in that specific state. And one of the poems that better
right.
represent this principle, if I may, let me just quickly show you the screen so you guys see the
Yes.
character, so it's a little bit easier to understand. Here, there you go.
Mm.
Araumi So this is
Oh,
like the
right.
violent sea. We
Mm.
see the galaxy spreading across the Sado Island. And the galaxy on top of us is spreading across the sea,
Uh-oh.
Okay.
and illuminating us while the waves are there. So yeah, just
Mm-hmm.
thought it would be interesting to mention specifically that. Sorry, we're probably running out of time.
Right. Oh, no, 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 we are
No,
not
we
yet.
still have time. We have time.
We
We have
still
time.
have time. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you for that. Because also, what
Is it
is
okay?
interesting to me, yes, it is. What is interesting to me, and this is once again, you know, a thought that includes the bigger picture. So we tend to think that the Japanese people are very good at controlling their feelings, or at least what they show to others. And I mean, there are a lot of reasons for that. So just yesterday, I talked with actually an Armenian person, and he said, I have difficulty reading the faces of my Japanese colleagues,
Yeah.
and so, but he has been here for a short time, so I'm sure
Yeah.
that when he gains a little bit more experience, it will become easier to read the faces, to read also the room, and so on. But it is really something difficult, and still, haiku, a big part of them reach exactly into that part of of the person, where they evoke that feeling. So, which is very interesting because while people here tend to be very, how can I put it, neutral in their interactions with others, because that is part of preserving, the harmony in the group, not disturbing the status quo and everything. At the same time, they have this genre that is there to do specifically that, to
Yeah.
evoke
It's an
those
outlet.
feelings. An
It's like an
outlet,
outlet.
yes,
And
yes,
it goes back to the situation. Everything's situational here. Everything's based on
yes, yeah,
context, right?
right,
So
again.
so the tatemae
Mm-hmm.
is very stoic, stone face, poker face. But when you get to the hone or in a different context, inner group or drinking party, whatever, I think the Japanese can be extremely emotional. I see it all the time.
Oh,
It's
yes, yeah.
just it's just
Yeah.
is it their public face or their private face? Are they opening up for friends or are they
Mm-hmm.
trying to keep the harmony with people who are not that close to them? So
Right.
maybe that's part of it too.
Oh, I think it is. Yes, it is part of it. And it is fascinating because all of those dots, here in the canvas, the cultural canvas, because poetry
Yeah.
also is also part of the culture. All the dots at some point they start connecting, even for
Yeah.
people who are not born and raised here.
True,
So
true.
Yeah.
Good.
Yes. Great. Okay, and then yeah, I mean, we still have about 10 minutes. So,
So if you have
so
any other thing, do you have any like you already gave us a few nuggets. Any other interesting facts about Basho that most people don't
mhm.
know about? Some insights that
Oh,
maybe the average dude like me
Mm.
doesn't know.
we have a lot. We have a lot. I mean, I could go on and on and on and on. One of the most interesting things is you probably heard about the frog poem, right?
Oh, yes, yes, the frog poem.
So
But let's talk a bit about it. Yes.
So I don't know, for people who haven't really heard of, I'm sure they probably don't know it's from Basho, but this is probably the most famous haiku of all time. I don't know if you can see. There you go. That's
Yes. Yes.
that's it. So when Basho was writing this poem goes something like "Furu ike ya, oops,
Mm.
kawazu ni tobikomu mizu no oto." So
Mm.
an old pond, the water of the sound of the water when a frog goes inside or jumps inside.
Yes.
And
Uh-huh.
when Matsuo Basho was, well, I think there's like even a book which are just translations, and I think there's like 100 translations of this possible haiku, which is, it's true, we can translate haiku in many, many, many ways if we keep the feeling and hopefully the structure. But when Matsuo Basho was actually writing this poem, he only had the last two syllables, the sound of the water when the
Mm.
frog goes inside. Well, what is fascinating specifically about this is that before Basho, no one thought that frogs were. I mean, you could, think about the sound that frogs make, or you could write about, the frog itself. But the sound of the water of the frog jumping in was like a subject that people wouldn't really consider like,
Mm.
aesthetic enough to write poetry about. And well, Basho was always like, we have to find nature and understand the universe within a specific context that we have here. And the context doesn't have to be glamorous. It's just what it
Mhm.
is. And it's just glamorous in itself. That's what it is, right? But
Yeah.
what I wanted to say specifically here is that he didn't really have the first syllable. So he talked to one of his disciples, one of his main disciples. His name was Kikaku. And Kikaku was a very interesting man. He did a lot of things. And we can also talk about the life of Kikaku. He loved drinking and going to brothels. But anyway, he had a style of poetry that was a lot different from Matsuo Basho. He was a lot about, he was more glamorous. He wanted to give, that glam to poetry. It was, something more, we had to have gold. We have to have this type of style,
Right.
right? And Matsuo Basho asked him, what should I have in the top of my poem? What should be the first syllable? And Kikaku mentioned you should put the Japanese yellow rose, and I think it's called nandakke
Ibuki? No.
ibuki kana. I think it's ibukiya or something like that. Well, the ibuki. I'm
Okay.
not sure if it's that
Not
one
really.
specifically. I would have to look it up.
Right.
It's in the book though. But this specifically this Japanese yellow rose is a very, very beautiful rose. I mean, I can show you. So if I go here, oh, but だっけ、ibuki
Okay.
じゃない。
Yes. Oh, no, it's not Ibuki. What is it? I don't remember the. Okay.
If I look Japanese yellow rose, I think
Oh, this one.
it will come
Yes.
up.
Oh,
Yes,
no,
this
no,
is
no,
the
no, no.
one.
That is Mokobara.
Oh, mokubara kana. I think he used probably the old word here. Yamabuki.
Ah,
Yamabuki da.
Yamabuki. Okay. Okay.
It's
Yamabuki.
Yamabuki. This is
Yes.
the, so he wanted to say, he was like, you have to use Kikaku was, please, use Yamabukiya in the very beginning. And it's, it's a very
Mm.
wonderful flower. It's just so beautiful. But
Mm-hmm.
Matsuo Basho was like, this clashes a lot with, the style. This doesn't go, life is not really like this. We want to go for something
Right.
that it's a lot more natural, a lot more, that reflects and ponders on the universe as a whole. And that's
Mm-hmm.
why he went to Furu Ikeya, an old pond, to actually convey this feeling of what he called the sabi, the feeling that conveys that we are all within the universe, and we have, it's experiencing this feeling of solitude and this feeling
Mm,
of we are so tiny compared to overall the whole universe. And that's how we have
Yeah,
this very, very, very famous poem.
right. Yeah.
interesting.
Wow.
Yeah,
So
but
yeah, just a fun
you can
anecdote.
hear it. You can hear the splash. You can see the movement.
Mm-hmm.
You can, and again, as Maya implied at the beginning, and you did too, Carlos. It's a magnification of the moment, which implies great appreciation,
Yeah.
and observation of it. So that's interesting. I never thought this deeply about haiku. So thank you. I'm
Yeah.
Yeah.
learning a
It
lot.
seems something very small and something that, I mean, it's just poetry, right? And that's the most important
Right.
thing about poetry and art in general. You think of it as like it's nothing, and it is nothing. And because it's nothing, it's a lot.
It's a lot,
Yeah.
yes.
Very
So
But that's
yes,
zen.
what
culture.
very then, yes, the circular zen there about nothing that is everything and everything that is nothing. But also it is interesting to me because once again, as you say, the moment, Tim, you mentioned this, and also Carlos. So we feel the moment, and it is, I think, very pragmatic, a pragmatic way of actually living your life because you are here and now. And I, once again, before I came here, for me, everything was in the future. So it's
Yeah, I
really
mean,
interesting,
you're
like
chasing the future,
chasing the future without understanding that, the moment,
where
this
you
moment,
are. I agree.
yes, where you are, it's here
True.
and it's gone, and then you can never get it back, right? So I love this
And,
about haiku as well because
and
it
yeah,
yeah, such a
I was
good
just gonna say,
expression of this.
the way you know you're not in the moment is if you're worried about the future or fretting about the past.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
know, so, and I've said this many times. My wife is an in the moment person, but she's just wired that way. She's not in
Mm,
anything, but that's how she is. She doesn't worry about
right.
anything to a fault,
Yeah.
and
To a
she doesn't
fault.
fret. She lets go of everything, and I'm like I'm the worry wart in the family. So I guess in that sense, I'm a little bit future oriented. So, but as I get older, I am getting more in the moment. So I'm evolving. So this is a good primer to help me along my path. So
Right. But you have your wife, you have Kurumi-san to help you do that, which is wonderful too.
to remind me.
Remind you, yes.
Live the now.
Exactly. Whether I
Yeah.
like it or not.
Well, you don't look like you dislike it. So
I'm
by
very
listening to
happy.
you, yes, yeah. So
I'm very happy
well,
to have a wise wife.
yes, that's a blessing, Tim. Yeah.
So
Okay. So, well, it's almost time for us to be, saying goodbye and wishing everybody a happy midweek. Carlos, thank you so very much for this
yeah,
pleasant,
thank you very much. I
very, very
loved it.
fun
I enjoyed
conversation
it.
too.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
enjoyed it. And so, where can we find your book and what languages it is in at the moment? Do you have any plans to publishing it in other languages as well? So please give us a little bit detail
Of
about
course.
this.
So you can buy the book in libraries, well, main libraries across Spain. Really, any city, really. The publishing house is called Quaterni in Spanish, and you can also find it in Latin America. Right now, the book is only, unfortunately, in Spanish, and
Mhm.
I'm actually looking for. That's also one of the reasons why I'm here in Japan right now. I thought I would be able maybe to find somebody who is also interested maybe in Japanese literature, specifically haiku, and see, would have to be someone who speaks Spanish and Japanese and who is an
Mhm.
English speaker to maybe create an English translation in collaboration with me or something like that. I think that would be wonderful. The book is very, very beautiful. The illustrations are also wonderful. The format is also very easy to read because it contains 70 chapters, which all of
Mhm.
them have around 4 haiku, and they narrate Matsuo Basho's life with uh, the life of his disciples all intertwined. It's just really, really, really interesting, and there was so much work put into this. So, if
Yeah,
I
I
can
can.
see
someone,
it. Yeah.
those or is would be interested, please feel free to reach out. I'm very, very active on LinkedIn, so just send me a DM or an email, and I'll be very, very happy to collaborate.
Yeah, so Carlos is
Wonderful.
on LinkedIn. You can also find the link to his profile on LinkedIn in the description of the video as well. So you can go there, yes, and just reach out to him. I will include also your website, Carlos, in the description of the video once we finish here. So I believe that people can contact you through the website as well. Yes,
Yes, the website is also, you can, yeah, absolutely, carloscornelio.com. I have
yes.
recently also started 2 new projects. I also help people find internships in Japan. I think most of for most of you guys who are living in
Okay.
Japan right now probably don't need to find internships in Japan. But if you want to come, from abroad into Japan, I can also help you do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I just recently also launched an online dictionary to learn kanji more efficiently. But that's
Oh,
also very random.
beautiful.
Good for you. Good for you.
Good for you, yes. Yeah,
Excellent.
wow, that's wonderful.
You can
Great.
drop that link as well
Yes,
if you
that
want.
brings so that I can include it in the description of the video as well.
Absolutely, I'll do that.
Yes, yes. Okay, great. So thanks a lot. And it's time for us to once again say thank you very much to our sponsors, Kanagawa Chuo Jutaku or Kanchu with James there. You can contact James at james@kanachu.com and Houze Inc., where you can work with Hana Uroshizawa Howell. Contact details of Hana are also in the description of the video. Please connect with them on LinkedIn. They're there. They're active as Carlos is, as Tim and I are. So everybody there, you can work with them. So thanks a lot to everybody, and we wish you a very
Thank you,
happy,
everyone.
yes, very happy and also productive midweek and the remainder of the week. That's all. We'll see you again on Sunday and once again next week. Thanks a lot.
See everybody.
See you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.